Welcome, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're tuning in from across the globe. This is Dayal along with Kishore Chandra and Achyuta Gopi. We are tuning in live from New York for Spirit Matters, your daily Bhakti Center podcast. Real talk and spiritual life. It's a tagline we're workshopping out there. I'm really excited and glad to be here. We wake up every morning, roll out of bed, brush our teeth, and then get into our podcast studios. And we just kind of share what's going on in our personal lives, how daily life and activities intersects with our spiritual life, how we understand deep philosophical truths and apply them into our modern context, trying to keep it personal, trying to keep it real. And there's no better people to do that than with this group of people right here. And so with that, how are you guys doing? They're like, I got nothing. I got nothing.
I'm doing great.
Ah, and I'm always waiting for Kishore, but I'm also we good. Everybody's good.
Everybody's good. Everybody's good. How was your weekends?
It was interesting. I maybe I'll start us off if that's okay. I had a weekend of it was my first weekend like off in a while, but it also wasn't off because I had a lot of stuff to do. And I guess I've been reflecting on this a little bit, and I know I've brought this up, and I've this is kind of where my head is at this morning. So I'm gonna keep it real this Monday morning. I think it's really interesting, this line. I was talking about it last week. This line of like, how much should I listen to my body and how much should I not? Like, I realized I was going down that area, that path of just like, you know what? I'm tired and I'm just gonna let my body sleep. And it was good for the first few days, and then after a while, I was like, why am I sleeping for like 12 hours? Like, what's going on with my body? Like, what's happening? And my mood was being affected. And I agreed last week to teach Bhagavatam class for the Bhakti Center this morning. I taught, and it was so nice actually. And I've been reflecting on that because it really shifted my mindset outside of me. And I thought it was very helpful because I think that like when you're just too focused on yourself, it can become, I don't know, a little solipsistic. And so instead of like me and my needs and my body and my this and my that and my whatever, I was just like, I have to wake up Monday morning and chant some rounds so that I can like, say that I'm trying to be a devotee and be spiritual and give this Bhagavatam class. And I have to prepare and I have to do it. And it was such a wonderful experience to be with the community of devotees, to give class. I haven't given class in like since early last year. Like I've just been busy in the doing all the things. And I was just reflecting on that because afterwards I just felt like so good. And we were joking right before we came on, just like, yeah, I woke up, I chanted some rounds, I did the thing, I put on the tilak and I gave the class, and now I'm feeling great. And it's like it's such a simple formula sometimes that I forget how simple it is and how much it actually works. Because I think especially, and I'll stop here, I think especially when we're caught in like the material world and issues and all of that stuff, like it's very easy to forget how simple the practices of bhakti are and how quickly they work. And so I'm just feeling good because I had a nice reminder today of like, oh yes, waking up early before the sun comes up and doing spiritual things in the morning, it works. Like it actually works.
I can't believe this actually
I
works.
can't believe it.
It's true. All of these things work. I'm astonished.
How are you, Dayal?
I'm still working on it. I remember that Srila Prabhupada said that the process of spiritual life or the process of Krishna consciousness is very simple, but the application is very difficult. And I think that sometimes in spiritual life we overlook things that are very simple. I remember when I first started to cook, that was my main service. I lived in an ashram. I moved into an ashram when I was 18. I didn't know anything about anything, not just spiritual life. I didn't know anything about anything. And I was it became my service to be a full-time chef. I did not know how to cook, but necessity is the mother of invention, and they needed a chef. And So I was thrown into the fire, figuratively and literally. And there was just something about me that did not want to follow recipes, especially if they were simple, because it was like, well, what's the accomplishment in that? You know, doing something that, like, just following a simple recipe and making something the same way that everyone's made it before. There was this need to, like, really experiment and do something outside the box and kind of push the envelope and make my mark, so to speak. So I did all kinds of weird. I was banned from using certain spices. I was putting all kinds of silly things in the dal and making weird stuff. And they were like, "Where did you get this idea?" And I was like, "Which recipe did you follow?" I was like, "I didn't follow a recipe. I just kind of did my own thing." But there was this kind of mindset of like, I can't follow a recipe. I've got to, like, carve my own path. And I think in spirituality, there's such this sense of, there's been this, like, rebellion almost, so to speak, of like, nobody's going to tell me what to do, or we talked about last week and the week before, like, this disillusionment through institution, through through, like, organization, and the sense of, like, any path will lead me where I want to go. And spiritual life is this untethered, unfettered thing that's just between me and I feel it. No one can deny that. And there's an element of that being very personal and real, but then we lose connection to actual simple spiritual processes that lead us in a very strong, like, when you think about the things that we do, not even spiritually, to get our life together, like eating healthy or exercising or, like, investing in a relationship, like, it's not rocket science. It's just the ability to do simple things consistently, and the people that I know that are, even when you look at, like, even our spiritual heroes, like Ranat Swami and Vaisheshika Prabhu and Sachinandan Swami, etc. It's like, you look at and you see examples of people who just do the have done and have taken the basic principles very, very seriously over a consistent long period of time. And I think that that is almost the hard part, is just accepting and embracing the simplicity and not overcomplicating things, which I can be a very complicated person. And I think that because I think the ego yearns for distinction, in some way. And I think that being able to just do the simple things in spiritual life is a strong recipe of success. But we just, why do we just stray away from that so much? Tell us, oh Achyuta.
I was gonna say the same thing. Achyuta, please give us the answers. Please.
I feel like things that we are the most consistent with, we think we are seeing the best results from. Like, if we think about it, anything that we're doing, even if we're going to a job every day, it's because they're going to pay us and we can see consistent results. Spirituality is not like that. Um, and I was reflecting a lot on that this
Mm.
weekend. What happens when you feel like you've been praying for a long time, or you've been chanting this Hare Krishna stuff for like 30 years or 40 years, and then you kind of feel as though you're not getting the benefits, or you're not receiving that reciprocation, or you don't see a return on your investments. How do you keep going with the faith that you will, or the faith that, oh, no, 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 they're happening, the changes are happening, they're just, they're small, but they're happening. Usually we don't even begin to see what we had until we fall off. And then all of a sudden,
Mm.
after a while, after the fall off, then you're like, something feels different, like something feels out of alignment. How do I get back into alignment? And sometimes having that simple answer, like, just take the medicine. um it doesn't dawn on us until it's a little bit further down, and then you're really out of alignment, and then you desperately need a fix, and then you're like, oh yeah, oh wait, this works. Oh, okay. But I do think we need those dualities. I mean, the life is giving them to us anyway, but we do need those dualities. So I kind of feel like I was seeing so much like devotional shaming this weekend. Like, I don't know. It felt like every time I scrolled somewhere, I would see some like little post, and they're like, "Srila Prabhupada said," and then they give like the most harsh spiritual truth that they could ever put in a. And I'm like, what? What is encouraging about this? Like, this does not encourage me to go deeper
Mm,
into my spiritual life. I feel like the times when Srila Prabhupada was more accommodating and accepting, which he was often, like he'd give this kind of like Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, he'd give this hard truth. And then he's like, and for all of you, there's this. But then everybody gets stuck on the hard truth. It's like pure devotees never ask for anything, ever, at any time, anywhere. They are just. And then we're always like, but what are we supposed to do? And we forget that that's pure devotees. And we're not pure devotees. And so we forget that Srila Prabhupada has made all these caveats. He's like, and for everybody else, here you go. And we stop reading halfway through. I'm like, nope, that's it. So I think that sometimes we can get caught up on what's in it for me? Where's my return investment? And I've been chanting and I'm not seeing any big results. So it's easy then for the mind to say, so then what's the worst that could happen? We can miss a day. Do we
mm.
really need it? It's that important.
That's beautiful. You have something you wanted to say, Kishore?
Yeah, I was just gonna add to that, saying that I also think that it's easy to go into that space of like, well, what's the worst that could happen? Or like, do I really need this? I think there's many different ways how we can get there, right? And indolence and indifference and like whatever, or not seeing the return in our investment and etc. But I think, especially right now, when we think of our relationship with Krishna as transactional, then it becomes very, very easy actually to go into those spaces. And especially in the material world, which we're in, um, and with everything that's always going on. I saw a meme the other day that was like, our generation is living through its third once in a lifetime event or something like that. And it's like, yeah, it's like it feels like the material, it's such like one thing after the other. And one thing that I was thinking about this morning, I was reflecting on, is like, I don't know, this idea of thinking that like we're special, or we're like the only ones going through all this suffering. It's just our generation. It's all the worst it's ever been. And I was giving this Bhagavatam class this morning, and I was saying that I was just like bringing up this meme. I was like, sorry, I'm bringing up a meme in Bhagavatam class, but I promise it's going somewhere. And one Prabhu was just like, in our generation, we had the Cold War, we had the Vietnam War, we had this, like he just went down the list. And I was just like, yeah, like all of this stuff has always existed. Unfortunately, it will continue to exist. And this is the nature of the material world. But I think that when you don't have that understanding, or when you're not properly situated, as Srila Prabhupada says, then it's really easy to go to veer off into spaces of like, what does it all mean? Everything is just terrible all the time. Like, screw this, whatever. I'm not going to chant today because I just feel so overwhelmed, or everything's too much, or like whatever. And I think that that's a really dangerous place to be in. And I'm speaking from my own personal experience, because I've noticed that when I let myself get to those places, I'm really letting myself take shelter of the material situation, as opposed to taking shelter of Krishna. And I'm allowing myself to just get more and more enraveled in that whole story of this material world. And I think that, because there's another point here which I won't go too much into, but I have questions about this for both of you, because I think that, yes, like our philosophy is really clear about like, there's the material world, there's the spiritual world, this is who we are, this is how we're situated in it, this is how you deal with it, etc. But this idea of like living in a spiritual bubble, or spiritually bypassing, it's really interesting, because I think it is really easy to veer off in that direction too. And you just have to be vigilant, because it's really easy also to be like on the other extreme. One extreme being like, what does it all mean? I can miss a day, whatever. And the other extreme, I'm thinking of Nectar of Instruction, where it's like either I hold too hard onto the rules, or I let them go completely. and the other extreme being like, you're all evil and demons, and I know what to do, and I'm chanting my rounds so perfectly, and I'm just the best, and like this. So I think it's really, one has to be vigilant of like, I don't want to be over here and I don't want to be over there. Like it has to be somewhere in between. It has to be kind of this middle path. Yeah, but I'd love to hear either of your thoughts on this or anything.
Hmm. I'm appreciating the dialogue, and I'm thinking about sort of this question of, what am I really looking for? So, like in an example, going back to me as a chef, when I was living in the ashram, this idea of like a goal, in Sanskrit, we use this word sadhya. And sadhya means our goal, what we're trying to achieve. And then the sadhana is that process we enact in order to achieve that goal. And when we practice sadhana, we're known as sadhakas. And so you have these three words that delineate, but it starts with the goal. What are you looking for? What's your need? What are you trying to fill in your life? And then based off of that, people ask the question, what should I do? What do I do? What should I do with my life? And it's like, well, what are you looking for? Where are you trying to go? What's my path? People say, what's my path? And it's like, well, where do you want that path to lead you? And then based off of that, you can answer the question of, okay, what path should you take, or what direction, etc. And if my goal at that time was just to make really wonderful food for people, then it would be easy. Follow a recipe of things that are delicious and are known. And one time somebody who's a chef is like, the people who made these recipes didn't just make them up. Like they tested them, they tried them, like they know that they work. They're in there for a reason. But that wasn't my goal, or wasn't only my goal. My goal was also, there was a recognition that I was looking for. There was a distinction that I needed. There was an ego drive, even in my spiritual life. And you can see how our ego life can make its way into our spiritual practices. And for us to take that step back and be able to like distinguish, like, okay, things aren't going the way I wanted them to in my spiritual life. Maybe because I have this whole bag of mixed motivations. And we don't have to beat ourselves up for that, but we start to see actually um, where we're at, and we start to see those places of growth. And also, I think that, like, because highly advanced spiritual people aren't devoid of needs. Like you said, like a pure devotee or advanced spiritualist shouldn't ask for anything. No, they don't ask for anything because they're fully full in the heart with love of God, and they like are experiencing, in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna talks about one whose happiness within, who is active and rejoices within, um, is in connection with the Supreme in the 5th chapter. And so there's this idea of like honestly recognizing, if I'm not there, then that instruction doesn't apply to me at this point, because I have a need for other things in my life. That's my full need for I haven't experienced that complete and divine connection. And so until I get to that place, I need to figure out what's my interim game plan. And I think that's why Srila Prabhupada said, we have this common phrase, chant and be happy, chant and be happy. That like chant, and therefore as a result of chanting, you'll be happy. Like as you were saying, Achyuta, like, I'm chanting. Where's the happiness? I got a little bit of happiness, but then I'm also a little bit of sadness. And there's a little, you know what I mean? It's like, and there was happiness, great, but then it's like, I'm not going to have any bad days. I have a bad days, but I'm chanting. Why am I having a bad day? I should never have a bad day again in my life. Why is this happening or that happening? And so there's also this sense of it being and I don't have any commentary to support this, but it's just an observation. And I've also just, heard other devotees that I respect and admire share this input of like a dual instruction of like chant or do your perform your sadhana, and also be happy, meaning arrange your life in such a way that you feel comfortable enough to continue your spiritual practices. Because if your basic material needs aren't met, and not just like, food, water, clothing, and shelter, but your need for connection, your need for recognition, your need for distinction, your need for what Richard Rohr calls our narcissistic fix. We all have one. And if we're not kind of just like at a baseline kind of quelling that raging voice, then it's going to overtake us. And then we're going to not be able to kind of focus on the spiritual practice, which by doing the spiritual practice consistently over time, will start to open up that space for us to receive divine connection where we'll no longer need those things. So it's that gradual, almost like a replacement, process of like gradually replacing all the crutches we use in the material world, knowing that they're crutches, but still knowing that they're valuable, until we get to a point of complete spiritual strength. And so honoring that journey and recognizing what I'm looking for and being honest with ourselves. I found whether I was a young brahmachari in cooking and refusing to following a recipe, putting dill in the dal and all kinds of weird stuff. And she just like, wait a minute, can we still be friends? And like, or going to like today where it's like recognizing my own needs of like being a teacher or being a leader or being seen in a certain way. And it's like if certain things were taken away, I wouldn't be so equipoised. I'd be really bummed. I get envious. I get insecure. I need to like make my mark materially in order to feel like I'm doing something. I get FOMO. I see you guys hanging out without me. I wonder where my place is in the world, but it's like, okay. And like navigating that, but recognizing, oh, that's the reason I'm frustrated in spiritual life. And I've been going on, I'm ranting, is not because the process isn't working. It's because I was expecting something different from it.
Yeah. I would every time I get stuck on it, I'm like, this man put dill in the doll.
There you go. There, I put it out there. I put it out there. My big secret is out.
Canceled.
Canceled.
Okay, so,
Canceled. Oh
like,
my god! I just lost 3,000 followers on Instagram. Oh my
Well,
god!
I had a-
It's going
I had a
down. It's
friend-
going down.
I had a friend.
Hashtag
and
cancel Doyle.
I came home one day, and like one of my friends was staying with me, and I came home one day, and he was like, "Oh, I made pasta. I did a whole thing." I was like, "Okay." And then he's like, "Oh, how's it taste?" I'm eating it. I'm like, "Huh." I was like, "It's not bad." And so he's like, "You taste that flavor?" And I'm like, I'm not sure. Do I?" This fool tells me, he's like, "It's pickle juice." I was like, "I'm sorry, it's what did you do?" I was like, why did you do this? Why? Just why? I one of my first services was cooking also. And I and in Indian cooking at that. So there were no recipes. Um so it was just, you had to like watch carefully and then hope a lot. Have a lot of faith that it's going to turn out okay. And I remember thinking like those two things. I was like, since I was 14, I've spent time figuring out this cooking thing so that I'm actually good at it, like really good at it. And all I could think of was, I was like, and here you come. You could have just asked me. But here we are throwing pickle juice in my pasta sauce for no reason. Like, it's not like, this is going to add a good, like, acidic tang to it. No, you had no reasons. And I was thinking about that just now when we were talking about this, that when you have somebody who has spent such a long time kind of honing a craft, right, and really putting in the work to really carve out this pathway, and then you veer off, and also often for no reason except for, well, this is what I want to do right now. It feels like such a slap in the face to the tradition. And I feel like I was like, oh, I don't want to do that spiritually. I don't want to look at all these spiritual masters who have spent their lives passing down a spiritual process. And then here I come and I decide, I'm like, I'm just not feeling it that way. I'm gonna do things differently, because I feel like, I've look, I got the divine right here. It's gonna talk to me. I'm good on that. And I feel like it's such a slap in the face of traditions of souls that have spent their lives and hundreds of thousands of years for spiritual practices. All of them. All of them. Because in any tradition, you'll find these people who've given their everything. And so I think that it's important to remember that about spiritual ancestors and about our like, it's like, how would I feel if I was teaching somebody painstakingly how to cook something and they're like, yeah, cool, no, I'm just gonna add these things because I feel like it. I feel like, what the hell? If you could just follow this recipe that I spent 10 years crafting from a one Indian man on the side of the road in Jaipur, because you know they don't give recipes. You just gotta like watch and hope that it works out, and then pray to your ancestors when you sprinkle in spices in that they tell you when to stop. Like I was like, and then I wrote it down, I tested it, I did all these things, I gave you all of this, and I feel like this is why Srila Prabhupada is so emphatic. He's like, take this Krishna consciousness. I've given you the things. I've done it. We're all like, yeah, but what if, what if all the carriers of the demigods were like figurative and not literal? What if Brahma's carrier is within me? Like, so I'll give you an example why I'm using that. I was listening to a lecture one day and it was Srimad Bhagavatam 111. I'd always had a problem with Canto 1, Chapter 1, Verse 1, because there's a translation and then the purport seemingly has nothing to do with it whatsoever. What I didn't realize is that he's summing up the entire Bhagavatam in that one purport. That's why it does that. And then it made more sense when I actually, took to the process. But looking at it, growing up, I read it and I was just like, I'm baffled. Why? So I thought maybe listening to a lecture will help. I listened to a lecture Srila Prabhupada gave on that Srimad Bhagavatam 111, intros, the whole thing. And none of it sounded like what was in that first purport. I was like, Srila Prabhupada, you're not helping me at all. Can you?
Can
And
we
then he
focus
said,
here,
does anyone
Prabhupada?
have...
Focus.
I know, like, bring it back, man. So I was like, he asked, does anybody have any questions? First person raises a hand. He says, yes. Like, I feel like Srila Prabhupada's got promise in his eyes. The disciple's got promise in his eyes. Disciple says, so Srila Prabhupada, should we understand that? So Brahma rides on a swan. Srila Prabhupada had not mentioned this in the lecture at all. He says, is this swan like literal or figurative? Like, because, how could that happen? And I swear Srila Prabhupada he paused for a second and he's like, it's literal. But why are you trying to understand this with your tiny brain? Like, I feel like the man, he's like, I was just preaching the most, like, I've spent time crafting a way to preach this. He spent time in India literally crafting how to preach in English to Brijbasis who were not understanding English, but he'd still preach anyway because he was prepping. So he's like, why? He's like, he was so baffled by the other person's being baffled. And I was just thinking just now, it's like, oh, this is why it's important to have traditions. This is why it's important to have lineages, because there's somebody who had to do the hard work of translating all of this, whatever spiritual path it is, even if it doesn't look like they translated volumes of physical books, they spent time translating in their soul. And when I kind of toss that away, like, that generation never did anything. I'm the one doing the hard work right now, okay? And we do this a lot, even with social justice. There was, all these kids like, oh, at first generation Black parents didn't do a thing. We the ones doing the hard work. And the Black parents like, we were just trying to go to school, okay? Like, we were just trying to get into schools. If you could think about that part and then put that, like, we were just trying to, like, not have crosses burning on lawns and then try and go to school, maybe drink from a water fountain once or twice. Like, we were just trying to live, and you're also just trying. So, we have to get out of that mindset of, like you said, there's an ego drive. I'm doing the work now. I'm the one making the difference. And it's because we want to make a difference, but it doesn't have to be like that. Anyhow, yeah, more. I have more on this tomorrow, but that whole, I feel like when you have a bhakti relapse, that was me this weekend. And it came from a really legitimate place, but the way I handled it, I was like burnt out. But the way I handled it, at a certain point, I kind of realized, I was like, what did I just do? Like, I was almost conscious of it the whole time and still powerless to stop myself. And then Sunday, I kind of felt like I have a Sheila. Me and my Sheila have a very interesting relationship. Okay, for everybody who doesn't know, a Shalagram Sheila is it's a very, very spiritual rock. Okay, bluntest terms, but also the Sheila is my best friend. So, like, sometimes my family will tease me like, so you've got a pet rock? I was like, stop it. But So I have a Sheila, and I feel like that's what pulled me back in. I honestly feel like sometimes we miss it, but Krishna pulls us back in. He's like, whoa, buddy, you're forgetting. Come back. And Sunday was such a beautiful experience of, I really felt like Krishna had decided, he's like, all right, look, you've been asking for reciprocation this whole time. Now you're kind of falling off the wagon. He's like, but watch this, come back, come back. And I wound up like winding up my weekend with like a really beautiful experience, just me and my sister, and we're kind of reading spiritual things to each other. She was mostly reading to me, but it was just like one of those things that made me remember, oh right, that's where my focus was. That's what I was doing. Kind of like Yuki Short, it's like you give that lecture and you're like, oh right, this is what was supposed to happen. So yeah, I can tell that story in length more tomorrow. But it's like, yeah, what happens when we have a bhakti relapse? Like what happens?
Yeah. Kishore, I want to hear some closing words for you, but before we do, I want to get our takeaways from Kimberly. What'd you hear today, and what are we walking away with aside from not putting pickle juice in the pasta sauce?
Take shelter in the spiritual world. The recipe for success is to accept and embrace simplicity and honoring spiritual masters and ancestors by following the process they had spent their whole lives refining. That's all.
Thank you so much, Kimberly. Beautiful. Kishore, we did a lot of talking. You got us going, and then we ran with it. You got a closing word for us, or something you wanted to share as we end today?
I have two closing
Ooh.
thoughts. The first closing thought warning is also to not put dill in the dal. This is very not okay.
Never. I was banned from using dill. I was
No.
not allowed to use dill
No
or
dill.
cinnamon. Dill and
No.
cinnamon were two things I was not allowed to use ever again. Banned.
And the other thing, I was really listening to Achyuta just speak now. Yeah, just understanding again this relationship with Krishna. It's such an interesting topic of bhakti relapse. But one thing that was on my mind this morning, and I won't go too much into it because we're at time, but just kind of accepting that we are conditioned souls and that I actually need help by the spiritual teachers who've done the proven and tested things to eventually one day, hopefully, see with spiritual eyes. And so just like understanding that our limited sense perception in our material bodies is not going to work, and we actually need help. And people and saints have understood that. Like I was reading Queen Kunti's prayers, and like she understood that. Like she was very clear that like she understood that I don't have the perception to see you, Krishna. Please let me see you. So yeah, that's kind of on my mind right now, of just like accepting that like I'm a conditioned soul. I'm in this body. I have limitations like this.
Beautiful. Pasha was asking, did I like the dill in the dal?
dill?
The answer was no. I had no idea what tasted good or not. I didn't even, people had to tell me if it was good. I was like, I don't know.
I'm like,
Dill
"Dal,
and
who hurt-
cinnamon and dal, like oof. Was it at the same time?
Who hurt you?
I don't
Dal,
even
who hurt
remember.
you?
I don't remember.
It's really
I don't
bad.
remember. Guys, we gotta end.
Okay.
This is going downhill. Let's just cut it. Just cut it. Cut it. Thank you guys so much for being here. We are grateful to have you. We're here every day. Please join us again tomorrow. And we look forward to seeing you soon. Bye-bye.